Hello again, everybody, and welcome to Ohio EPA's 2022 Virtual Compliance Assistance Conference. My name is Ben Halton, and I'm with the Division of Air Pollution Control here at Ohio EPA's Central District Office, and will be moderating the Preparing for Success, What to Expect During an Ohio EPA Air Inspection session. Ohio EPA's 2022 Virtual Compliance Assistance Conference has 24 sessions over 2 weeks. Today, this is the first of 3 sessions focusing on air pollution control. Registration information and a conference agenda are located on the Ohio EPA's conference webpage. We hope you can join us for additional conference sessions. Please remember, it is never too late to sign up for the next conference session, and all sessions are being recorded for you to view later. Before we get started, we would like to point your attention to one of today's environmental fun facts. Depending on your county, your air pollution contact could be an Ohio EPA district office or a local air agency. Local air agencies are contracted organizations located throughout the state that perform primarily the same functions as the Ohio EPA district offices. These agencies predate Ohio EPA and typically are part of a city, county, or health district organization. To learn more about your air pollution contact, scan the QR code on this slide to get more information. And with that, I would like to turn it over to our presenter, Olen Ackman, in our Division of Air Pollution Control. Olen has 29 years of experience at Ohio EPA. Since 2008, Olen has been a Senior Environmental Specialist with Central District Office, Division of Air Pollution Control. His responsibilities include permit review, technical assistance, and best available technology evaluation, and training staff on permit development and compliance-related items such as report review, facility inspections, and stack testing. With that, Olen, it is all yours.
Okay, thanks, Ben. Welcome everyone. Thanks for taking time out of your morning to join us. Hopefully you get something out of this, and you might learn something. If you've been through this before, hopefully maybe you might pick up something you didn't pick up the first time. So some of the things we hope to go through today is give you an overview of the inspection process for Ohio EPA. This is going to include pretty much all the divisions, because all the divisions are kind of using the same rough procedure during their inspections. Also, we're going to go into and identify specifically what the air inspectors are going to be looking for, and then how to prepare for these inspections, primarily the physical, and I'm going to touch on the virtual that we were doing during the pandemic, and identify any common violations found during the inspection, and then talk about some do's and don'ts. So this is our first of 3 polls we have today. We start out, we'd like to know, have any of you ever participated in an inspection with the Ohio EPA? And this could be with any division, not just with air pollution. So have you had any interaction with it? So if you could select either yes or no, let us know. So take a moment to do that.
All right, maybe another 5 seconds. Please make your selection and hit the submit button.
Okay, it looks like a majority of you guys have, but there's a number of you who haven't had an inspection with the Ohio EPA. So for those of you who have had an inspection, hopefully this kind of rings true and it's kind of consistent with your experiences. And for those of you who haven't, once again, I hope you learned something from this. Also, the goal of this is to kind of dismiss and take away a lot of there's a lot of stereotypes of as what an Ohio EPA inspection entails, and the results of it. We're basically like police officers out there writing tickets. That's not the case. We want you guys to be in compliance. That's one of the reasons why we do these trainings. Okay, it's important to note that Ohio EPA has 5 divisions. There's 5 district offices and 5 divisions. And in the district offices, Each one of these divisions are going to be responsible for their own area of inspection, okay? So as an air pollution inspector, I'm only going to be going out and looking at those permitted or regulated sources of air pollution. Again, everything associated with them. I'm not going to be looking at surface water, and I'm not going to be looking at like hazardous waste. That's going to be the responsibility of those inspectors and those divisions. It's also note that sometimes you may have what we call a multimedia inspection, where multiple divisions may visit the facility at the same time, and also during the course of the year, depending upon your permitting obligations that you have, you may be inspected by one or more of these divisions, okay? And each one is going to be only looking at their area of responsibility. Sometimes you can have overlaps of what the divisions do with regards to their inspection. Sometimes, I've got a case here that I'll talk about in a bit. That we'll do like a little micro inspection, and I'll talk about like some of the things that hazardous waste might be interested in when they're looking at like a spray booth. Also, I want to do a little bit of a plug here for those of you that have multiple responsibilities with other divisions. I strongly encourage you to sit through some other trainings we've got tomorrow. Frank Singalis is going to be talking about hazardous waste obligations at 9 o'clock tomorrow, and then on Wednesday, October the 5th, John Schmidt's going to be talking about surface water. Generally, all three of us do these presentations together, but those guys are really informative, and it's a lot it's a lot of good information that they have. Give you an example. Sometimes you can have a case where you do have overlap, okay? And this is a super rare example, but this is a case where we had an air pollution source in the background of the photograph. You can see that blue thing, that's a bag house, and these are cartridge filters from that bag house. This facility was having some issues with the bag house. It wasn't operating properly. It resulted in notice of violation from us. And in that, they went about correcting this. They got it all fixed up, and then they placed these cartridge filters in the roll-off container. So they resolved the issues with air pollution, but then a surface water inspector went out later on that summer, I think it was, and they were doing just a general surface water inspection, and they found that these were in the roll-off container. Well, apparently this resulted in another violation because rainwater had gotten down through these cartridge filters and run out the bottom of the roll-off container and ended up getting into the stormwater drains, which was, I guess, a violation of their NPDES permit. Once again, this is where you can get some overlay with other divisions, and certainly it was not the intention of the company, but sometimes these things can happen. It's just an unintentional, weird situation. But just want to make you aware of that, where you can get some overlay of other divisions. So how are these inspections selected? Well, it's one of 5 things. The surface water program, the air program, and the hazardous waste program in the state get money from US EPA. We have grant commitments. As such, they expect us to visit these facilities every so often. So for example, large permitted facilities, Title V facilities, you're going to see this once every couple of years. Commercial waste treatment facilities, just wastewater treatment facilities, that's like every couple of years, and the large quantity generators or hazardous waste, I think those are maybe yearly, maybe every couple of years. All 5 divisions get complaint investigations, okay? People see a pipe discharging something into a stream that's questionable, they see drums stored, things that are open burned, they open the tap and to get a drink of water and it looks odd, they're gonna call in complaints, okay? The 4th bulletin there is significant noncompliance. That's kind of an odd situation, but that's a facility that has had some issues with compliance, and they're working on returning to them. As such, they may have an increased inspection frequency just to make sure that everything's being corrected and meeting the terms of the notice of violation, for example. The last one is a special inspection initiative. This is kind of a targeted outreach for compliance and also some education. These are primarily small mom and pop facilities like dry cleaners, salvage yards, stormwater controls, construction sites. It's a number of different little places. It's important to note that each division, they may or may not announce. It really depends upon that division, but pretty much all complaint investigations are going to be unannounced. So the inspection process for each of the divisions at Ohio EPA are going to follow this. There's going to be an opening meeting, so that when the inspector shows up, they're going to identify who they are, and they're going to identify what the division they represent, and specifically what they're going to be looking at while they're at your facility. And then they're going to walk through the facility and they're going to look at those sources of pollution that are either permitted or regulated by some rule. And then they're going to review the records. A lot of the permits require record keeping. The purpose of record keeping is to demonstrate compliance between inspection events. And really, right, and you're going to hear me talk about this a lot, and you're going to probably get tired of hearing me say this, but records are super important, okay? That is really your only opportunity, especially with air pollution control, to demonstrate compliance. Then we'll have a closing meeting. The inspector will sit down with you. They'll tell you what they've seen while they were at the facility and any areas of improvement that may need to occur, and answer any questions you may have. And then they'll follow up with a letter. So hopefully everybody on this call, if you get an inspection from Ohio EPA, regardless of the division, you get what I call a thumbs up letter or a notice of compliance, or what I call a sideways thumb, which is notice violation. I'll talk about that in greater detail at the conclusion of our presentation. This is just a placeholder to note that, since we're during the pandemic, we were doing virtual inspections. They're going to follow pretty much the same protocol as I just talked about in the previous slide. However, what's unique about these is you'll be called up ahead of time and you'll have a pre-meeting. And the purpose of the pre-meeting is to let you know, kind of work through a lot of these things, like establish what kind of media streaming that you do. Or do you use WebEx, do you use Teams, Zoom, and we'll try to meet whatever platform you use. And then also, like records kind of tended to be a little bit of a difficult challenge, because sometimes, if you have a combination of hard copy records and electronic records, you may need to scan those hard copy records and submit them. But we'll try to work through it all with you. But I just wanted to let you guys know that hopefully we don't have to return to virtual inspections. So before the inspection, basically, have a plan, have a backup. Especially if you're a larger facility and you anticipate, inspections occurring every couple of years, have somebody who's going to be able to talk to the inspector if they arrive, whether it's announced or unannounced. So it could be you, the plant manager, EH&S manager, be owner. For air pollution, I've had operators. Maintenance operators show me around and be able to answer all my questions. Basically, we're just looking for somebody to be able to describe the operation, be able to identify where pipes discharge, if there's any kind of surface water control structures, where do stacks go, if there's any associated air pollution control equipment records, be able to describe the processes, explain things, and tell us where the records are kept. Also, I want to note here that some of the divisions, like hazardous waste and I think drinking groundwater, both take photographs during their inspections. This will be discussed with you in the opening meeting of the inspection, and you can take pictures, and also you can request copies of these photographs as well. Air pollution may or may not. I personally never take photographs, but I know some inspectors within the air program do take photographs. So air pollution inspections. Just kind of getting into the meat of it while you're all here. Some of the things I'm going to be going through today is like, why are we visiting? Okay, once again, those annual inspections. Talk about like an opening meeting, facility walkthrough. We're actually looking through those emissions units, evaluating their operation against a permit. Permit overview. Permits are pretty important, and I'll talk about that, and then their associated record keeping. Open burning, we'll talk about that. Common violations that we see, and we'll kind of go into some helpful hints. And something that's not up here is I'll talk about the letters that we'll follow up with. So don't be surprised. These inspections do happen. If you're a Title V facility, you're going to see this once every couple of years. If you're a synthetic minor facility, meaning you could be subject to the Title V permitting program, but you've taken some kind of voluntary restriction to avoid those permitting obligations, that's going to be once every 5 years. If you're a small mom and pop facility, meaning you're what we call a true minor, your emissions are below 100 tons per year of any of the pollutants that are identified in the Clean Air Act, you may never see us. It really depends upon the district office, and it depends upon what the local air authorities do. While we're out there, be open, be honest. If we ask a question and you don't have an answer, just say I don't have an answer for that. Let me follow up with you. That's fine. I was just at a facility last week. The facility asked me a couple questions. I didn't have answers to them. That's something I've got to get back with them today. Later on, after I get off the call, I'm going to get back with them and let them know what I found out. Once again, these inspections may or may not be announced. If it's a complaint investigation, it's not going to be announced. While we're at your facility, show us those emission units. Those are going to be the ones that are permitted sources of pollution, or they're regulated by rules somehow. Basically, those are the things that make you money. Okay, the boilers, paint booths, those things. Control equipment is nothing more than a piece of appliance that bolts onto the emissions unit that either reduces or eliminates a particular pollutant. Okay, baghouses reduce or eliminate particulate matter, thermal oxidizers, control organic material from coating operations. And once again, there's record keeping. We're going to take a look at that. Ben noted on this in the fun fact slide about the presence of the air locals. Air is unique in the sense that we do have air locals, and this predate the Ohio EPA, and they've been around for a long time. And they essentially do the same thing as Ohio EPA district office. In this slide, if you look at the broad border that's around each one of these geographical areas in the state of Ohio, that represents a district office. We have 5 district offices. And what's a little bit of unique, if you're subject to any air pollution permitting, some district office, in particular, Northeast District Office and Southwest District Office, those district offices have a lot of air locals. Like in Central District Office here in Central Ohio, we don't have any air locals. In Southwest District Office, for example, if you have a surface water permit that you need, or you have some hazardous waste obligations, you'll work with one of 3 air locals, depending upon what county you're in, or one of 2 district offices, either Central District Office or Northeast District Office. Southwest District Office is the only district office in Ohio EPA that does not have any dedicated air personnel located on staff. This is just this is the same picture that's in the fun fact. I strongly recommend that you use the Q code. I use that, and it's pretty slick, so it helps you to identify who you need to be contacting with regarding any kind of air permitting obligations. So once again, while we're visiting the facility, it's a routine inspection. Title V every 5 years, synthetic minor or Title V every 2 years, synthetic minor every 5 years. Or we've gotten a response to a complaint. Air pollution is unique in the sense that we get a lot of complaints. A lot of the other divisions get complaints, but with air pollution, air emissions, it goes up, and there's no control as to where it's going to go or who the recipient's going to be and how that person is going to respond to that experience. So we get a lot of complaints with odors, we get a lot of complaints with dust and open burning. The last one is a unique thing. It's kind of added to that one slide why Ohio EPA might be visiting. Is we get a lot of we get a lot of permit applications. We may need to visit your facility to get a better understanding as to what you do, so that inspector or that permit writer can act on that application and process that permit. The other thing, compliance reports, fee emission reports, these are kind of more targeted, especially to small mom and pop facilities, where an owner or an operator has submitted an application and has received a permit for something, and it's never communicated to you when there's a transfer of ownership, or when you assumed responsibility for this facility, and we reach out to you and there's no point of contact, we may not have a phone number, and we actually have to physically arrive at your facility and take a look. But that's kind of a unique situation that's really just small mom and pop facilities. We're going to walk through the facility. So we're going to look at those permitted or regulated sources of air pollution. We're going to be looking for any kind of visible emissions, if there's a stack or any odors that are unique to the process. Also, we're going to be looking, as I said, those emission units. That's going to be correlated to an applicable permit if you have one. We're going to review the records. Once again, records are super important. That's the way you're going to, that's your opportunity to demonstrate compliance, ongoing compliance, in the absence of an actual air inspector being on site. Then we're going to check to make sure that anything that needs a permit has one, okay? I'll talk about that in a little more detail later on. Basically, if you've gotten a boiler installed, does it need a permit? We'll kind of do a catalog of what's there. Visible stack emissions, these are pretty common. This is something we're going to be looking at as we're walking around the facility, and we're going to evaluate what we see coming out of that stack against a permit. Now, I want to point something out here that really, it depends upon how the permit is drafted and what the applicable limits are that are included in the permit. These may or may not be indicative of a compliance issue. For example, the picture on the left side, we used to have a lot of coal-fired boilers in the state. We don't have as many as we used to, but one time we had a lot. And when we had those, they were permitted to have what we called excessive visible emissions, and they would do shakeout one time out of the day in order for that boiler to continue to operate optimally. And it wouldn't be considered necessarily a violation. And also, the picture on the left side, I want to show something like, say if you're new to a facility and you're familiar with opacity, okay, basically, how much particulate matter is in that gas stream leaving that emissions unit. I have no idea what this stack is for. It could be a boiler, it could be a thermal oxidizer, it could be a cremator. I don't know, crematory, I don't know what it is. But the thing is, if you come from a facility, and let's say the facility you came from had a permit, and the permit had an established limit of 20% opacity as a 6-minute average. That was the point of compliance that this stack had to meet. You come to a new facility, and this new facility, you look at it and you're like, oh, this is in compliance, but you've not taken time to read the permit. Well, the permit may say 0% opacity as a 6-minute average. Basically, no emissions, no visible emissions could be seen. Point here is, please take time to read your permit, because I'm using your permit that's been issued to your facility to evaluate compliance. The other thing we're going to be looking at, there's a lot of these visible fugitive emissions. Basically, these are particular emissions that are not going through the stack. There's a lot of these. The picture on the left side, you've got a crusher, and between the boom and the crusher and that surge pile, there appears to be a lot of particulate matter. That might be indicative of a complete absence of a water spray bar, or the water spray bar is not turned on. Roadways and parking areas, these could be, for those of you in the audience today that are responsible for unpaved roadways and parking areas, you know how much of a challenge this can be to keep on top of maintaining and minimizing particulate emissions from these. You spray it and it dries out, so a bit of a challenge, but this is something we're looking at as far as an inspection. Paints and solvents, this is nothing more than my attempt at having a physical representation of something that you can't see, okay? So for those of you that are at facilities that are applying paints, adhesives, inks, once that solids content of that material gets on the surface that you're putting it on, well, it's done its job. The thing that I'm looking at from a regulating standpoint is I'm interested in the volatile organic compound, those organic components of that solvent, because it goes up and out and you can't see it. The only way that you can demonstrate compliance to me as a regulator with this, and this is really, and once again, to the record keeping, is you've got to keep records of this. Okay, that's your only way of demonstrating compliance with a source like this. The other thing I'm going to be looking at control equipment. Now, an inspector could be looking at pretty much any kind of control equipment. There's a bunch of different control equipment. Unfortunately, I just don't have the time to sit and go through a whole lot of different control equipment. But if we could have bag houses, you could have thermal oxidizers, you could have packed towers to control, some organic material or acid gases. There's a bunch of different control equipment. In this case, the control equipment for this particular source is going to be a fabric filter. Okay, so what we're going to do here is I just want to imagine, like what am I doing when I'm at your facility? What am I looking at as an air inspector? Okay, so somebody at your facility, either you or somebody at the facility, has applied for and gotten a permit for 2 3-sided spray booths. We know that they're 3-sided because there's no back door on them. If there was a back door, then it would be 4-sided. But these are 3-sided spray booths. We're doing an annual compliance inspection. I reviewed the permit with you. We've gone through the records. So what is it I'm looking at? Well, one of the things as it relates to control equipment I'm going to be making sure of is that there's a fabric filter in this. So that has in the spray booth in the foreground here. If you look at that, you can see that there's a filter media in place. And we'll assume that there's one in the background. Are both of these emission units operating? Yes, so they're operating at the time of the inspection. The other thing that I would be looking at is I would have looked at the underlying permit application and determine what kind of guns would be used in these spray booths. If you look, you can kind of make out they're HVLP guns, high vapor, low pressure. I'd make sure that they're consistent with what was in the application. The other thing I want to look at is in the background, you'll see some 5-gallon totes. Those 5-gallon totes, I'm going to be writing down, what kind of any kind of physical information that I can find on them. Like how many pounds of VOC per gallon that's being applied of the coating at the time of the inspection. Also, what kind of solvents or thinning solvents I'm going to be using. Also, I want to note, where you could have an overlap of other divisions. The hazardous waste division, they might be interested in how you're managing your filter media once it's done. Or if those are the lighting in this unit, if that's still a fluorescent tube lighting, how are you managing those lighting? So both of those things in the hazardous waste program is going to be considered what they call universal waste. They also might be interested in how you're managing your solvent waste as well. But that's just basically how I'm going to be looking at. The other thing I want to look at also is like the coating usage when it's applied. How is that being recorded? How's that information, that data that's being captured, that's going to be a requirement of your permit application or your permit? How is that being captured? Is it the responsibility of both of these technicians to be writing that down? Or is there like some kind of data logger or some kind of meter that's attached to the paint distribution system in the background that goes back to your office, or somebody that's a comptroller who's responsible for purchasing things? How's that being gathered? Another thing that we'll be looking at is parametric monitoring. And once again, there's a bunch of different parametric monitoring. And this is a water column for a bag house. You could have a manometer for parametric monitoring. You could have digital monitors. And also, each piece of control equipment has its individualized, specific piece of parametric monitoring. So an inspector is going to be looking and recording if an emissions unit is operating. They're going to record the reading at the time of the inspection. Now, I point this out because the pressure range that is going to be established for a particular piece of control equipment is going to be established in the permit. It's going to be outlined. That's going to be based upon manufacturer's data that's going to be supplied by you, the applicant, or a consultant or somebody, and carried through to the actual final permit. In this case, if you look, right around, let's say if the permitted range was between 2 to 8 inches of water in that water column, and the inspector shows up and it's reading where that upper arrow is at, this would be a point of non-compliance. So this would be potentially a violation. This would be indicative of this baghouse maybe needing, the bags shaken. Who knows? It may be something wrong with the water column. Also, I want to point out to you, in the absence of an inspector, generally you're going to have to go out and record this information on a day-to-day basis, or maybe a week-to-week basis, the purpose of which is to make sure and to ensure that that piece of control equipment is operating correctly, okay? And if it's not, to go about taking corrective measures to fix it. We're going to look at the records. Once again, records. Records are super important for air pollution control, and it's one I'm sure you guys do not like keeping track of, and it's my least favorite part of it. Aspect of an inspection, but it has to be done. We're going to be looking into paint and solvent usage. What's the VOC content of the materials? Reference back to that little inspection we did of the 2 spray booths. How much paint is being used? What's the VOC content of that paint? What's the VOC content of the solvent? How much of it has been used? Fuel usage, fuel types. If you've got a boiler, emergency generator, how much diesel has been used in the emergency generator? How much natural gas has been used in the boiler? Have you had fuel oil backup? How much fuel was used? Material throughput, production rates. This could be about anything. This is absolutely limitless because of the very diverse manufacturing landscape that we have in the state. This could be tons of bread that are baked in a bakery facility. How many tons of glass is pulled out of a glass tank at a glass manufacturing plant? How much rock has been crushed annually at a quarry? It could just go on and on. Pollution control equipment, monitoring, and maintenance. That parametric monitoring I just talked about. how often have you been recording the pressure drop? What's the pressure drop been for each day that you've been recording, or each week if you've gone out and looked at it? Are the filters in place in that spray booth that I talked about? When was the last time the baghouse has been, maintenance has been done on? When was the last time those filters in that spray booth have been replaced? So this is our second of 3 poll questions. How important is it to read your air permit? If you select one answer, very important, somewhat important, or not important at all. Take a moment to answer that.
Looks like we're getting pretty close, Olen. Let's give it another 10 or 15 seconds, and then I'll close the poll. All right, I'm going to close the poll.
Okay, super. Well, only 1% not important at all, but everybody else is 1 important. Well, anyway, it's very important. Okay, that you take time to read your air permit, that you have one. I've been doing this training for a while, and I've been okay. Let's see. I think I need to have control again there, Ben. Let me see here. Okay. I think it might be locked up or something, Ben. Oh, there we go. Thank you. Okay. So it is really important, and I appreciate everybody saying that. One of the I would be surprised if those of you who hold an air permit, there's somebody on this training today that doesn't have their air permit with them, or they don't know the air permit, and there's no shame in that. I've been to Title V facilities, and like as an inspector, one of the first things I always ask is, do you have a copy of your air permit? Because that helps me to evaluate, where things might stand. Because if you don't have the very instrument, the very mechanism that outlines and obligates you to do these things, you may not be familiar with what it tells you and what outlines what you need to do. It's always interesting to me that some places don't have their permit, because generally these air permits are not free, and some of them you spend a lot of money on. So get a copy of your air permit. Reach out to your district office or local air authority. We'll get a copy of that permit to you, either electronically or hard copy. Once you get a copy of it, make sure you take time to read it. Have an idea of what it says. Kind of familiarize yourself with it. Make sure you're not missing anything. Highlight requirements. Make notes. Evaluate the permit and compare that to your activities. Like in the case of the spray booth, for example, and let's say you applied for and got a permit for the spray booths, and then all of a sudden, you have an opportunity to transition from an organic-based coating to a water-based coating. Or let's say you transition from a spray coating where you can go to a electrostatic spray, where you completely not using any VOC content at all. It's possible that you might be able to get away from maybe even having a permit for that particular activity. Anyway, just become familiar with what it's doing. Also, if it's the responsibility of somebody to keep track of things, like you record the pressure drop, or in the case of the spray booth that I talked about, if it's the responsibility of those 2 technicians to be writing down that information, make sure they understand what it is they need to record each day, as well as, how much. That ties into daily monitoring record keeping, and that is one of our number one notices of violation that we have, what we call administrative violations, where there's just a shortcoming of the record keeping. Why are permits important? Well, I'm using, to kind of displace to eliminate any kind of myth as to what an air inspection is. I'm using the permit that you've applied for and you have obtained for your facility or for a particular emissions unit or a source of pollution in your facility. I'm using that permit application. I'm evaluating compliance at your facility against that permit that you hold. I'm going to making sure that you're maintaining your records as the permit requires. The other thing, make sure that anything that needs an air permit has one. And a lot of complaints that I've generally heard over the years, and a lot of air inspectors hear this, is like people, and it's a fair complaint, air pollution is extremely, extremely complicated. People get frustrated with it. And I'll be the first person to admit that I agree with that. However, the great thing about an air permit is that it just encapsulates everything that you need to focus on as far as compliance at your facility. You don't need to go look at anything else, because we try to put all applicable state and federal requirements, regulations, and their associated limit and record keeping in that permit that you hold. Once again, monitoring record keeping, why is it important? Well, it's important because it helps you to ensure proper operations of the emissions unit and associated control equipment if you have any. And also, we're using this record keeping to evaluate the operation in light of us not being there. Like in the case of the spray booths, in those particular emission units, record keeping is really your only opportunity to demonstrate ongoing compliance because of the nature of the material that you're using. Also, record keeping can help you with calculating your fee emission reports that you have to do, especially if you're a Title V facility. You have to turn those in every year. And record keeping can often, it can be associated with just one emission unit, or it can be a facility-wide. And also, it's important to note that if you have a question about this during the permit stage, if it's something that's not, you can modify the permit possibly, okay, to make sure that the record keeping is pretty much consistent with what you're doing. So checking for an air permit, it's important to note that, basically 4 rules of thumb, okay? So we're looking for something that does, if you have something that comes into your facility and, this just is a trigger, very just basic thing. It's just like, hey, gets you thinking, do I need to get a permit for this? So is it something that has a stack? Is it vent outside, or does it come with a dust collector? Some emissions units, they come with control equipment associated with them. Might need a permit. Are you using any solvents, paints, inks, adhesives? Once again, that may require a permit. Are you burning any fuel? Emergency generators, boilers, all these require permit evaluation. Anything smoky, dusty, odorous, once again, all possibly for permit consideration. Some common operations, and this is not an exhaustive list, but these are just common sources that we see. Boilers, stone crushing, paint booths, a lot of paint booths, unpaved roadways. We're seeing a lot more emergency generators. Those are being very, very, very common. Does everything need a permit? Not necessarily. Boilers are a good example of that. Boilers kind of run the complete spectrum of permitting obligations in the state. We've got something called Ohio Special, meaning it's a boiler with a heat input less than 10 million pounds of BTU per hour. That's completely exempted, but boilers go all the way up to very large Title V facilities. They also subject to permit by rule. We'll work with you and reach out to your district office, local air authority, and we'll try to help you out with your permit evaluation. Okay, do you need a permit or not? And also definitely contact OCAP. Our third and last poll of the day is open burning allowed in Ohio? So if you could select either yes or no and let us know, that would be great.
All right, Olen, we're just getting above almost to 70%. I'll let it go for another 10 to 15 seconds and then close it.
Okay.
All right, I'm going to go ahead and close the poll.
All right, thank you. Okay, is open burning allowed in Ohio? Well, 46% of you said yes, and 54% of you said no. Well, let me see if Ben's hand over the. Okay. Open burning in Ohio. There's always some confusion about this, and okay, let me see. It's not turning over. There we go. Generally, open burning in Ohio is not permitted. For those of you who said yes, I hate to say that. You cannot open burn for the purposes of material recovery, as indicated in the picture on the left side of the slide. No wire burning, and you can't do it for material disposal purposes, as referenced in the picture on the right side. Okay. I will say this about wire burning. Wire burning is the single activity in air pollution that I'm familiar with that has accelerated enforcement, and it goes directly to enforcement and stipulated penalties. I mean, it is the only thing. So basically, don't light anything off unless you want to bring attention to yourself and somebody calls in a complaint and we visit your facility. Okay, so please don't burn that. Don't light anything off. In the case of open burning, there are with air pollution, there's always like some kind of weird exemption with something. There are things that can be burned with permission. Okay. However, I strongly recommend that you reach out to the district office or local air authority before you light anything off, especially if you're within a local air authority. Some of the local air authorities that have jurisdiction in this state have open burning requirements that are even more restrictive than what we have as a state overall. So before you light anything off, contact your district office or local air authority first, please. Some common air pollution violations that we see: installing and operating equipment without getting a permit. Okay, all the sources that I referenced a few slides back. Boiler goes in, emergency generator goes in, and it's not had a permit evaluation, and it may need a permit. Not maintaining the records required by the permits. For example, to use a spray booth again, the permit that was issued to those two spray booths requires you to keep track of how much coating is being applied each day and what's the physical parameters of that coating, how many pounds of VOC per gallon is in that coating. Exceeding permit limits. Example of that, to use the example of the spray booth again, a little micro inspection that we did a few slides ago. The permit is, puts a limit of VOC, the pounds of VOC per gallon in that permit. So it establishes 3 pounds of VOC per gallon for any coating that you use. As long as the coating that comes in that's being applied meets that limit, you're good. Well, you get a new contract, and that new customer has a performance coating, and that performance coating has 12 pounds of VOC per gallon. That may be an example. That would be an example of a potential permit limit exceedance. Not maintaining air pollution control equipment as required. Okay, like I talked about the pressure drop, it's reading high. That could be an example of not maintaining a piece of control equipment as required. And lastly, open burning. So after we were at the facility, we've walked around, we've looked at everything. I'm sure that everybody on this call today is going to get a compliance letter. That's what my hope is. Okay, this slide I call the thumbs up. Okay. We call this a notice of compliance letter, but it only means that the facility is in compliance with the particular division that did the inspection. Okay, so if I send you a letter from Air Pollution Control, it's only a compliance letter for those air sources that I looked at. I've been to facilities and there seems to be some confusion at times, people, and they're like, hey, EPA was just out here and they didn't have any problems. Well, surface water may not have a problem, but I might have one. Like that example I used early on about those filters. It's an unfortunate situation. It's a weird situation, but the facility got everything cleared up with air pollution control, but it ended up being a problem with surface water. However, in the event that we see an area of improvement that's needed, we're going to send a notice violation, okay? The notice of violation is going to outline the violations that were identified during the inspection, and then we're also going to outline what needs to be done to correct those violations and then give you a time frame to fix them, okay? These may or may not come with a checklist, but also it's going to give you some time frame. So, once you get this letter, if you get it, please contact us, okay? If something's not correct in there, let us know. If it's just factually incorrect, we make mistakes as well. Also let us know if it's not clear what you need to do to fix this, to fix the problem and to correct the violation, what corrective measures that you need to take. If you just need to clarify what corrective measures, reach out to us, let us know. If you need more time to respond, let us know as well. Reach out to us like, hey, I need more time to respond to this. Okay, the time frame that you've given me, it's not meetable. So please do not ignore the NOV. Just set it aside. Don't wait until the last day to respond to it either. Okay, and absolutely don't cut off communication with the inspector. It's kind of like a gag or something, I'm here from the government, I want to help. Honestly, we want you guys to be in compliance. Okay, that's why we do these compliance conferences. For those of you who sit through John Schmidt's presentation for surface water or Frank Sengales' presentation for surface water, they have the same thing to say. Okay, they want you guys to be in compliance. We want to work with you. So reach out if you have questions. After and it's important to note that the majority of the violations are resolved without any legal actions. Okay, a lot of them are going to be administrative record-keeping violations. Okay, and those are corrected. We'll work with you to take steps to avoid those enforcement. And once everything's resolved, then you'll get a resolution of violation letter, ROV, saying, okay, it identifies the violations are resolved and how they were resolved. Helpful hints, Ohio EPA's goal is compliance. It's not enforcement, okay? We're not police officers. We're not out there writing tickets for moving violations. Make the record keeping as simple as possible. With air pollution, that's super important. If it's easier for you to keep records electronically, keep them electronically. If you have staff that is averse to computers and it's easier for them to keep track of things hard copy, by all means, let them use the media that's easier for them. We don't tell you how to keep records in air pollution. We do outline what records need to be captured, but not how you maintain them. Make sure you develop a pattern for record keeping reports. Make sure that you write down in the calendar when you need to submit these reports, especially if you're to Title V or synthetic miner facilities. There's a lot of reports that are necessary for that. And also, I can't stress this enough, foster a good relationship with your neighbors. A lot of people see your facilities, they smell something, they see something that's a concern, and if it's a concern for them, they're going to phone it in. And it's not always a nosy neighbor. It could be a corporate neighbor. It may be a competitor. Who knows? We have no control over who calls in the complaints, and we have no idea sometimes who calls in the complaints. So they can declare confidentiality. So, we just develop a good relationship with them. So these are some compliance assistance resources. Please, once again, reach out to OCAP if you have any questions. Reach out to your district office, local air authority. And if you're in the process of getting a permit, or if you know you need to get a permit and you haven't gotten around to getting one, reach out to this, okay? Good source of it. There's a lot of information out there that we're more than happy to help you guys with. Okay, does anybody have any questions?
Hey, Olen, we did get a couple of questions in during the presentation that I think perhaps the group as a whole will benefit from. So I'm going to read a couple. We've only got a few minutes, maybe 4 or 5 minutes here. So the first one, is there a specific ID the inspectors will present at the opening of the meeting, allowing the facility to verify their credentials?
Well, no, I'm not necessarily. For those of you who have a permit or you're in the process of getting a permit, there's a 9-digit number. It's kind of like a license plate number, so to speak, for what we call a facility ID number. You don't necessarily need to present that. I mean, the inspector is going to know that, and some facilities, if the inspector works with them enough, it's burned into their brain. Like I have a facility that I've worked with for 20 years, and I know their premise number off the top of my head. So you don't necessarily need to know that. I think I'd rather have you have your permit in hand if possible. So.
Yeah, and
I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I think they might have been wondering whether we'll carry an ID so they know we are who we're supposed to be.
Yeah, definitely. Sorry about that. I thought premise number. Anyway, yes, we will have an identification. All Ohio EPA employees have an ID on them, and they should have it available to present if you ask for it. In 29 years, I've never been asked to present my ID, but I'm more than happy to present it if I'm asked. Also, they'll have business cards. I know those things are kind of antiquated, outdated, but we still hand out business cards. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, I think it should. All right, we've got another one here. It says, during an inspection at a facility, an Ohio EPA representative stated that for the permit at the facility, there would be an inspection every 3 years. Could this be unique to the area the facility was located? I thought this might be a good opportunity for us to expand on some reasons why somebody might see us more frequently than the prescribed 2-year or 5-year period.
Yeah, an increased inspection frequency sometimes, and as I said, it could be. And correct me if I'm wrong here, Ben or John. But sometimes you can have an increased inspection frequency because of a facility who's going through some compliance. For example, if there's been some compliance issues, we may be inspecting with increased frequency. The other is, sometimes facilities, it's just the nature of their manufacturing that they have a presence that has an odor, for example, and there's a lot of concerned citizens, and that doesn't indicate there's a problem, but we have to respond to those complaints. And in responding to them, we may visit the facility with more frequency. That's not to pick on them or anything, but it's just like we have to respond to the complaints. So.
And it might. And it might be good to point out to folks that just because we say or it's prescribed that you'll have a full inspection every 2 or 5 years. That's not to say that that's the only time you're going to see an air inspector. As you mentioned, we might come out there for a complaint, but we also witness stack tests and things like that. So there might have been another reason for an inspector to tell a facility, hey, I'm going to be back out here, but it's not going to be 5 years. So
right. And then we've also got things that we call mega facilities. And I didn't go into this, but I mean, we have a few facilities that we call mega facilities that, because they're so large, we have to break up the inspections that we do. And I didn't bring that up because we just don't have that many of them.
All right, we got time for one more, and we probably don't have time to get into all the details of this one, but essentially the question was about what record keeping is necessary under the de minimis rule. And I'm not trying to put you on the spot, Olen. I know you have too many screens open to go look at that, so maybe we could just talk about how that responsibility kind of transfers to the regulated entity in those cases.
Yeah, generally, and once again, and Ben or John, you can correct me on this, but generally with de minimis sources, if you have if the source is uncontrolled, and you basically flip the switch, and it runs 24/7. And at no point during that period do you exceed what we call 10 pounds per day of any criteria pollutant, meaning if it doesn't exceed more than 10 pounds per day of particulate matter, nitrogen oxides, sulfur oxides, organic compounds, including volatile organic compounds, carbon monoxide. If it doesn't exceed 10 pounds per day, generally you don't have to have any record keeping. However, if it is controlled and controlled in some manner, then you have to kind of keep some records of that, because it's, lack of a better term, and I can't think of anything off the top of my head right now, is it's artificially de minimis, meaning like if the control equipment were to go off, then you could exceed that and then thus not be de minimis anymore. So therefore, you need to keep records of sometimes those operations. So.
Yeah, I think that was a good summary. And as a reminder, if we didn't get to your question during the Q&A portion, or if we think we can do a better job of answering it, we will reach out to you via email following today's session. So thank you, Olen, for our great presentation. We're going to have to move on from the Q&A for some final slides here. And thank you, everyone, for attending this 2022 Virtual Compliance Assistance Conference session. Before we end the session today, we would like to point your attention to another one of today's environmental fun facts. Want to catch up on a session you missed? Ohio EPA's YouTube channel houses recordings of past webinars and trainings. All sessions from our 2022 Virtual Compliance Assistance Conference will be uploaded on our YouTube channel a few weeks after the conference, if you missed a session or want to rewatch one you attended. You can scan the QR code on this slide to go to our YouTube channel and search for past webinars and trainings. And lastly, Ohio EPA hosts a series of webinars throughout the year on a variety of environmental topics. This slide provides information on how to register for these upcoming webinars, where to find recordings of previous webinars, and how to sign up to receive notifications of upcoming webinars through our Ohio EPA Customer Support Center. With that, we will end this session of Ohio EPA's 2022 Virtual Compliance Assistance Conference. We hope you can join us for other conference sessions. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.